Thank you very much. And I will not want to fill the entire time with the slides. So I'll be very brief on my slides. I'm just going to use them as a guiding note. The key part of what I'm trying to address here is what the implications of the development of AI are for leadership, in particular in government, in business, in research, and society. Of course, if one looks at this big project, you look at almost everywhere in the world, everyone is talking about the benefits of this new technology, AI, something that probably for many years one would not have thought that it will actually reach this level of maturity in such a short space of time. It's simply because a number of technologies will take a number of years before they mature to the point where one can then start being threatened about. So my talk will touch about what AI is briefly, since I'm just starting the first speaker. I will talk about diversity. I'll talk about some of the challenges in the pitfalls, and I will end with the implications, and of course, some silver linings that relate to these shortfalls. Next slide, please. So if one thinks of it very briefly, you can think of AI as a set of algorithms that mimic human and natural intelligence. But these algorithms learn from the examples that are presented as data. They learn by finding thousands of parameters, uh, and they use this known knowledge to then make prediction about the future. Of course, now, with the computing power becoming better and better from time to time, things become easier to compute. You start having, data sets that are very big. That includes multiple sources, not just one element, but you can sort of infuse a number of sources into one particular space to then make informed decisions. Next slide. So one thing that we know is that a human mind can process at most 8 dimensions. But when you think of AI models that can handle over 1,000 dimensions across millions of records over a very long period of time, which makes it more efficient, which makes it more accurate, which makes it better for us to understand the world that we live in. But what we know for now is that this AI is very narrow, meaning that it can only perform tasks that it has been trained to generalize. Training is the key word here. And I want to just touch, as we proceed with my slides, what this training means and what comes with the training. What are the pitfalls of what we feed these models? Of course, this is different from how human mind can perform, because human minds, naturally, we are trained to reason. And the question is now, how do we even ensure that AI can then help in the reasoning element? Just like Forex, AI is embedded in the systems, but on its own, it cannot be used. Next slide. So there are a few issues that I just want to talk to quickly, which are in a way talk to to the pitfalls. The first one is the issue around out of sample issues. I've mentioned earlier, dear colleagues, that AI learns from the data that we give. So issues where you have hard knowledge, which is presented by the designer, um, can sort of then move into the models depending on the limitations that the designer might have had of the world or of where the data is coming from. So there's an issue where you can sort of experience things that are out of sample, and that becomes a particular issue. There's an issue of frequency bias, and bias is a big issue around AI, where frequently held beliefs are considered to be more accurate. And when one then starts training these models with those kind of biases, they sort of continue propagating the very same biases going forward. Issues of systematic discrimination come in depending on where you're getting the data from. I remember I interacted with a model from another country. I won't mention names, but because of the people being of a particular type, particular race, particular, visual effects, when we tried the very same model in the African context, it just failed dismally. And again, it was an issue of training because the model was trained with data that came from one particular area. Historic injustices come in as well. There are things that, for example, if you think of applications where one is using loan applications, what could apply in one area might not be suitable in a particular area. We know for a fact, I'm in Africa now, we know that Africa, for example, will be home to 42% of the world's youth by the year 2030, according to the World Economic Forum. If that happens, and you sort of have models that were trained, let's say, from the global north, where probably people will sort of be considered more stable when they're older. Here you have a particular space where a younger will be the majority. You don't want to create models that will then discriminate against the majority. Next slide, please. There are issues again around the designer agendas. The issue is that is every engagement a good one? Maybe not. And again, we know that AI, as much as it's very good, it can be designed to maximize screen time. We've seen this in issues like, YouTube, in other TikTok, and so on, where you want people to be glued to a particular screen, which can sort of be a distraction in a way from the main issues. There are a lot of issues that one can do, and we do these kind of things deliberately from one application to the other. There are issues where, for example, when we design some algorithms, there are spaces where I've operated in, like a mechanism design, where you want to optimize the welfare of, think of bidding, for example, where you want the seller to then get more profit. And you can design a system that is biased in favor of the seller. But when you do that, what about the welfare of the users? What about, there are a lot of thinking that needs to there's a lot of things that needs to be embedded within the use of AI. Issues about the service that you're offering. If you're government and you sort of just pick one particular offering and you say e-government or mobile government, it talks about this new technology or new access, which is quicker. It might come with a lot of disadvantages as well. I don't want to get into that now. Let's move into the next slide, please. So there are issues that are very critical here, and this is where maybe the next speaker will talk slightly into detail about. There are issues about design responsibilities. I'm an engineer. We know that we are held accountable as engineers for if I build a bridge and it falls, I have to be held accountable. In the AI space, how do we deal with these aspects? If I design an AI application, but then it sort of learns and it continues learning beyond what I've trained it to do, which it's supposed to do, then it starts doing things that are not right. It then sort of it starts, to become biased in a particular way because of the data that it has. Who do you hold accountable? It starts discriminating against women. It starts discriminating against minority races and so forth. How do you then hold the designers accountable? Or can you even hold them accountable? And that's a very big question that we have. So there's an issue about designer ownership. There's an issue of ethics that comes into this picture, for example. For example, if you have a car that's about to crash and it has to decide on crashing against an old man or a young baby to save the owner of the car, if it does that, do you blame the owner? Do you blame the car manufacturer? Who do you hold accountable in such cases? And in these examples that I'm giving them in a very generic form. But what you have is that in the core of the applications, you have issues which it could be a particular government service. It could be a social grant designing, a system that allocates grants to certain people in various forms. The biases that then come. Do you hold government accountable? But government might say, yes, we didn't design the system. We went and we bought it from so and so. So who do you hold accountable? There are all those issues that then come into the picture. Next slide, please. And I'll be moving towards the end now. So there are issues that, in my view, they talk about even risks that then come with these issues. We have seen cases of people sort of falsifying data. You have seen things that are happening now around what is called deepfakes, fake emails. You can talk about a whole lot of things that have now become major risks that come with this particular tool. Not so long ago, I was going to give a talk, and my speech writer in my office wrote me a speech. And I actually went to Chat GPT and I asked it to write a speech for the very same topic. Interestingly, the speech that was written by Chat GPT was, it was flowing much better than the speech that was written by the colleague in my office, and so on. But the issue is that you will never be too sure when you come to the facts, because again, it's a question of where this model is getting the data from. It could be getting data from sources that are not correct sources. They may not be reliable, and so forth. So there are all these kind of biases that then come with this very good technology. Next slide, please. So there are things that I think generally we use to safeguard systems against. One is what we call the guardrails. And while AI has its own pitfalls, it's a question of how do we then create adequate guardrails. The guardrails could be in the form of standards, it could be in the form of policies, it could be, having auditing practices that need to then be used. This is available for many technologies that we have. On the AI side, we're still far from that. What we're starting to see in the world, we're starting to see trend around the guardrails around the usage of data. You have policies like POPI in South Africa, protection of personal information, and you can see similar kind of tools in the limits in the UK and other places as well. But at the moment, we don't have guardrails around the design and the deployment of AI, and this is where there's a particular gap at the moment. Next slide, quickly. When it comes to these guardrails as well, we always talk about AI being more like nuclear, but nuclear you can trace easily. You can sort of, there's a way where you can trace certain materials, uranium, and so forth. But here you're dealing with something that it could not be traced because of, inputs could be coming from anywhere, depending on the design of these models. We have, for example, in South Africa, the Customer Protection Act and so on, which are designed to create some kind of a cushion for the consumers. Do we have that ready for AI-based tools? Certainly not. The question is, how do we then start building those before one can then start looking into the implications of using AI in a space that can be affected by so many unknowns? And who do you hold accountable? Who do you then take to court? And so forth. And that becomes the bigger question that we have. If we just go to the next slide, and I think we should be getting closer to the end. So the issue is that, in my view, we need to actually ensure that there's adequate funding for research in AI. As much as technology is maturing, we need to actually have direct investment, which is deliberate. That deals with inclusion of the African context, which can curb the rapidly growing brain drainage, which can encourage what is called ethical AI. But then again, what is ethical AI? How do we then even teach ethics in this particular space? We need to then have a space of understanding technology properly to start, ensuring that there's a continuum from young age to the old age. At the moment, everyone is excited, but people are using AI in the form of black boxes where, I have a problem, I have data, I throw it in this box, I get some outcome. This is what AI says. And this is what then happens when you don't have a responsible and accountable artificial intelligence. My sense is that we need more investment in the so-called soft engineering. I think we've done very well in investing in the hard engineering element. And soft engineering, I'm talking about aspects such as, application development, gaming development, where you can then start training, understanding of these things from who benefits from these. Let's try to gamify some of these things to teach the key parts of AI. In my last slide, just go to there and I will pause there after that. The issue is that AI is a game changer, but it requires government, private sector, civil society to work together because there are serious implications for everyone. As a consumer, somebody who's sitting somewhere, do you just want them to consume this technology without even knowing what it means for them? How do you even educate them? How do we deal with science engagement where the developers of this technology can engage with the end users of the technology? There's a whole lot of gaps that need to be closed. And these will require working together between government, private sector, civil society, and people themselves who are the end users. Maybe for now, Program Director, let me pause here. I just thought let me just start this aspect by just giving this sense of where the challenges are, but there's a way that one can actually solve this problem. It's a question of how do we ensure that you have all parties coming together. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Prof Nelwamondo. These are thought-provoking statements that you have said and related to us. I think because you're sitting in a hot car, we should have our audience interaction with you now so that you can move and you're free to move.
That's fine.
So do you have questions, audience, for Fulufhelo? I don't see anything in the chat at the moment, but you're free to still put your questions there if you want to. Fulufhelo, can I ask you about e-government, which you just glossed over?
Yes.
Do you think that AI can help us with e-government in South Africa? Will it help?
Absolutely, it would. I think the key aspect that remains is a challenge around how do you ensure that, again, it's not just a black box component. So government should know why they need to provide as government before you even talk about it in the electronic form. Because when one then starts just relying on the AI to then drive issues, you find that no one is accountable, and we should be able to hold officials accountable for their decisions.
Right, right. Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, I'm worried that we will program the AIs to have the mentality of public officials, in which case it's not going to help very much. But yes.
Indeed. And maybe if I just talk to that very briefly, it's a question of where are we getting our sources of data. And the larger the data, the better. But it also creates a lot of confusion. It creates a lot of biases as well. It's a question of how do you then know that the sample that you're actually getting, how you pre-process it, will actually give you the desired outcome.
Right, right. Thank you. Sue McKenna asks, in your view, what is the role of the university or higher education sector in addressing these concerns about the nature of AI?
I think this is a very good question. And my sense is the role of the universities has changed probably more significantly over the last few years than it has ever been seen before. It's a question of how do we then teach things in a manner that is, aligned with where the world is going. In the past, for example, you teach learners how to write a good essay. At the moment, maybe you don't need to actually memorize things anymore because we have this volume of data at our disposal and so forth. It's a question of how do we then redesign the curriculum to be, in line with the new knowledge, focusing on the courses like data science, probably forcing even some of the areas where you can say whether you are doing theology, but you must understand aspects of data science, you must understand, elements of AI as part of the curriculum. So I think we're facing a space where we need to rethink the whole university curriculum altogether. And the role of the university in that would then be to teach this new curriculum and educate people differently. The better educated society would be the better society to deliver us to greatness.
Great. That is a quotable statement there. Tukelu Matwaneng says, what are the key initiatives or projects in South Africa or Africa that are leveraging AI for social or economic development?
There's quite a number of them. I can't really give you the full list now, but there's quite a number of them on the African continent. You look into Rwanda, there are a lot of issues that are talking about, for example, in the robotic space and the drones, with applications that look into access of medication, for example, in areas where you can't really go by car because you're going to a remote area. Quite a number of applications. I will be next week in Kenya talking about some of those as well. So there's quite a number of applications, but AI I think is growing in the field of, in the continent of Africa in many areas.
That's good to hear. Yes. Well, any questions? If you want to put up your virtual hand, you're very welcome. Tokelo again says, since AI is a game changer, how is its adoption influencing the job market and skills development in South Africa or Africa?
That's a very good question. And the issue here on the job market, the job market, firstly, we have a lot of people unemployed on the African continent. You look at South Africa has unemployment rates in the almost mid-30s, 33% to 35%, depending on which quarter. The issue is now, how do we, and one of the reasons is that people have been trained in the areas that are very difficult to employ. It's a question of now, how do we then shift the education system to the point that, as opposed to focusing on creating employment, can someone then create a new startup where they can then employ people to do certain things, even in the AI space or even other areas where they can bring the applications? So it brings a number of new jobs, but at the same time, it takes away a number of jobs. It's a question of, is this balanced? And if it's balanced, what is that balance? Is it 60% new jobs and 40% old? How does it work? We still don't know the figures per se, but it brings that shift.
Right, right. Now that is one of our great dilemmas, isn't it? of how to deal with the job shedding that happens with AI. I just want to explain about load shedding, everyone. This is the rolling blackouts that we have in South Africa. Our grid doesn't have the capacity to accommodate all of us. That's the short version, the short explanation. And so we all have hours in the day that we're without power. So it becomes very interesting. Life becomes very interesting, and you become aware that there are large parts of the globe where electricity isn't a regular commodity that is there for your use. So we're learning to adapt. I'm wondering whether AI is going to help us with that, solving the load shedding problem. Fulufhelo, what do you think?
I think it also depends on which sources are we using. It also depends on decision making. It has a role to play. Will it be the source? Certainly not, but it can play a role in terms of how you apply it in choosing, the correct energy mix. Do we use coal and solar? Which one do we use during which time and in what proportion? That it surely can help us.
Right. Yes, there certainly are people working in South Africa on modeling the energy situation and developing decision-making tools for that. So yes, the researchers always do amazing things. We just want the politicians to implement them.
Absolutely, but then politicians as well, because they're not properly educated in the very same space, it becomes difficult for them to just take those solutions. That's why, we talk of red tapes. It takes much longer for politicians to then adopt technologies, even when they are very clear. But it's also because we're not taking everyone together. The point that I sort of made in my last slide, saying we need to work together, and working together will require taking them by the hand and say, understand what we are doing. We are saving your interest. We are saving the interest of the public. Let's work together to then make good decisions. And we'll use these tools responsibly.
Right. That makes sense. Fulufhelo, thank you very much indeed for parking your car and speaking to us this afternoon. We're very honored. And
thank you very much.
There is a question, if you can still stay on, it looks like. Mariana?
Jansi, it's not actually a question. There was a question in the chat box about agriculture. And of course, I'm very interested in that.
Yes, yes, indeed. Let's see. This is from someone from the Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
No? Yes. I see AI slowly being introduced in agricultural sector. However, in Africa, there will be a challenge with balancing AI introduction and job security.
It's very true. That's a very good question. But then again, it talks to the the use of responsible AI. So let me give you an example. Africa has, in most parts of Africa, we have land that is very, very dry, including South Africa, which is now a very much of a water scarce country. So when you talk of introducing AI in agriculture, it's a good thing to then sort of have, and we have a few examples of farmers who will then say, we want to put AI in our farms. When we irrigate our crops, we want to give them the right amount of water because we don't have a lot of water. Therefore, as opposed to watering the soil and the weeds and so on, and making sure that every plant next to the plant that you want to harvest is watered, can you put precision agriculture, precision watering to the plant, and water that then gets absorbed by the plant easily? And that on its own becomes a new field that can create jobs on its own, as opposed to taking away jobs. Of course, you might be taking the hard jobs of hard labor and whatnot, but then you can introduce the new jobs of how do you then do the piping to do this precision agriculture? How do you do the maintenance and so forth? And it talks largely to this big shift that needs to take place in how we educate people.